Welcome to That's What I Call Marketing, the podcast where you'll hear from the leading lights in the marketing world and listen to their unique insights. If you are enjoying episodes of That's What I Call Marketing, and you can do us one small favor, rate or review an episode, we would really appreciate it. Well, we are back with another episode of our singles. Yes, these are shorter episodes where we dive deep into some of the hot marketing topics of recent times. And what's brilliant about these single series is it's not just opinion, it's based on data. So we are partnering with Tracksuit, the affordable, always-on brand tracking dashboard, to dive deep into some of the hot topics of marketing. We're going to talk about, Deliveroo. We're going to be talking about sunscreen. Yes, well, look, we're having a bit of a heat wave here in the UK and Ireland, so we definitely need to cover that off. And we are going to talk about Lego at Formula One. As I said, these episodes are brought to you in partnership with Tracksuit. And of course, you know that the not so secret fact is that companies are paying hundreds of thousands for brand tracking, which often leaves it out of the question for many modern brands. And we know we're all under pressure. So Tracksuit have come along. They are providing enterprise level brand tracking without that heavy price tag. Their in-house research experts do the heavy lifting for you by using best-in-class practices to craft and launch your survey. It goes out to thousands of people each week with panels made up of millions around the world. And around the world is key because Tracksuit is available in so many markets. It's available, of course, in New Zealand, Australia, the US, the UK, Ireland, and now it has entered France and Germany. If you are in any of those markets and you want to find out more about Tracksuit and finding a dashboard that is accessible and easy to understand for everyone from CSOs, CMOs, CFOs, founders, go to gotracksuit.com and find out more. I am joined again by the brilliant Dan Fleming and Jasper Skinner from Tracksuit. So let's get into today's episode of The Singles. Dan, Jasper, great to see you again. Another episode of The Singles. Looking forward to this.
Hey, Connor.
Absolutely. Hey, Connor.
Good. Well, listen, we've a lot, as per usual, a lot to get through, lots of great data, lots of amazing stories. We're going to start, first of all, with Deliveroo news and the acquisition from DoorDash, which, in a way, probably it was surprising. It came out of nowhere. I'm sure for Deliveroo, it was known that this was happening, but, it was a big announcement. But it's a hugely competitive space in the UK that DoorDash have bought into, and then kind of buying Deliveroo seems like a really interesting option.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was huge news. They've paid a 44% premium for Deliveroo based on their last trading day. So a great result for the Deliveroo team. But to your point, it's such a crowded market, and it feels like the best place to start is how that market is now starting to consolidate. And so Delivery went through this phenomenal growth period over the pandemic, and there was a lot of new companies popping up, a lot of fragmentation, a lot of growth. And then since then, there's been this consolidation that seems to be happening where in the UK, there seems to be three large players. You've got Just Eat, who has the highest awareness in the UK, sitting at 91% awareness.
Right.
You have Uber Eats sitting at 88% awareness. And then you have Deliveroo sitting at 87% awareness. And all three of them have had some form of merger or financial activity happen this year, with Just Eat getting purchased by Prosus, a Dutch technology investor. Uber Eats have just invested in a Turkish delivery app and taken a controlling stake. And now Deliveroo's been acquired. It's got to be the hottest category in all of markets at the moment. And I think what's been really interesting with it is when you compare Deliveroo to DoorDash being in 30 markets and the US leader controlling roughly about 2/3 of the market in the US, versus Deliveroo, who sits in 9 markets, with the UK and Ireland being one of its most prominent. It's just the perfect acquisition target for DoorDash to really start to propel itself at a global level, to really start to steal market share. Because, I mean, in terms of differentiation for these types of brands, there's only so many tactics you can take, and tackling a Deliveroo, which in the context of DoorDash is a little bit of a minnow. So, I mean, DoorDash has I think it's 42 million monthly active users versus Deliveroo that has 7 million monthly active users. Market cap, DoorDash sits at about 90 billion. Deliveroo sits at roughly about 3 billion USD. So, I mean, it's just the perfect target for DoorDash to really start to spread its global brand, of which it's done previously when it acquired, I think, might mispronounce this, Volt back in 2022. So it is coming out of their growth playbook for sure.
Do you think there's going to be a Deliveroo turns to DoorDash branding?
Oh, I was thinking about this, and I was just using Volt as the precedent, and it seems to, like, DoorDash's strategy is they've got scale, they've got the technology, they've got the operations, but they allow brands to operate independently in their local market because they have that local presence and they have that local trust. So I think what I'd imagine is the global structure, it's quite a neat kind of fold in terms of teams and leadership, but from a brand exercise would sit quite separately. And it is just really building this absolute Goliath brand that is DoorDash, where they'll collectively serve over 1 billion people across the world, which is wild. The other thing, in terms of just thinking about that, will they take on their own brand? I think they let Deliveroo do its thing. I think what's interesting in looking at their brand metrics is what actually drives people to purchase in this category, because I imagine to the group here, how many people are extremely loyal to one delivery app? Like, where does preference actually drive loyalty, or are you really just delivery app shopping? I mean, does anyone have a preferred delivery app here?
I'll be honest, I'm a Deliveroo user. A lot of that is out of convenience, but also I think I've fallen perhaps into like a habitual routine of using Deliveroo, just because I know that it's the go-to that serves almost all of the restaurants sort of southwest of where I typically order.
Your favourite restaurants in Tooting, all on Deliveroo.
That's it.
How about
now and it has your favourites in the app now. You know what I mean? Like, so
exactly.
Path of least resistance. I'll just go with. Go with it.
Yeah, they're thinking Nando's again.
So, so on that, when you think of like what are they buying, what is DoorDash acquiring of Deliveroo amongst, if they could, from a transaction point of view, probably couldn't acquire. Absolutely, they didn't have their pick of anyone. But if they did, why would you pick Deliveroo over others? I mean, throwing the question back to you both, what do you think drives people through the funnel in the delivery app category?
I think a lot of it is driven, honestly, out of convenience. I mean, I remember I spent a period of time living out in Kent where Deliveroo weren't active and it was just Eat. So therefore my choices were streamlined. And like I said, I think for me, it's more of a where has my favorite restaurants and it's, I think the user journey of it, and I'll come on to talk about some of this shortly actually, but like I know, for example, with Deliveroo, they've launched their like loyalty program, and they executed that in a campaign they launched at the end of last year. And I think there is a reward-based scheme there, but I think for me, fundamentally, it's just about ease and efficiency.
I'm the same here where I'm based, Deliveroo wouldn't cover, so it would be Just Eat. But even when we were in Liverpool earlier this year and we'd kind of been out all day and the kids were wrecked and we were like, we just order something to the hotel. But we used Uber Eats, and I don't even know why. I think it was just our thought process went straight to Uber Eats. And it was brilliant. It was so like we all got different things. Like
that's interesting. I feel like mine is also just, so I'm Uber Eats, and I think that this is probably just because of the easy use. But it's not necessary when it feels like everything is kind of commoditized, because those three big players all have what you'd expect to be similar restaurant spread within major cities. You think it would come down to like pricing and deals, but we found that the brand attributes that drive conversion the least is deals and promotions. It's actually ease of use on the app. To your point, kind of like ease and accessibility drives the category the most. And then our old favorite, trust, is there sitting second. And if I was to start to hypothesize around like DoorDash as to why do they think about trust more broadly. Is this push of theirs from just going from restaurant delivery to grocery delivery and non-restaurant products? And their CEO in their latest earnings report was talking about how because of DoorDash's consumer trust, it's allowing them to push wider product ranges and outside of their core, which is restaurant delivery. So yeah, it's a fascinating category where everyone seems to sit on the same sort of benchmark for all the key category drivers. And so it does feel like it is the category where it's just capital and market share really drives results. And I mean, Deliveroo has done a phenomenal job the last 12 months driving their own preference and improving their conversion through the funnel. But it is a 3-horse race where it's neck and neck.
Yeah, I think there's another piece that can be looked at in this, and that's the role that brand building plays in evaluations and in things like these acquisitions. And, to that extent, I want to give a quick shout out to this creative agency, Pablo. So they won the Deliveroo, the global account back in 2020, and they have launched some absolutely fantastic work since then. It's a garlic and lemon campaign that they launched, as well as the brand platform that they launched last year, which, as I mentioned, sort of intertwined with a promotional campaign for their loyalty program, Deliveroo Plus. And I think, just to that point of the loyalty program, I think where Deliveroo, and Dan, you touched on this as well, where they've really, I think, doubled down on is on this customer centricity and like baking customer sort of focus into everything they do, whether that's from their advertising right the way through to the product experience. And exactly as Dan's point, the fact that they've built this tool that has achieved this ease to use, which, is such a high conversion driver within the category. Really goes to show the play they made.
Yeah.
And it is amazing, like that brand piece, because, Just Eat have built such a strong brand and so many codes. I mean, my kids sing the jingle. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I love the jingle.
Yeah. I mean, it's a masterclass. How can you ever forget Snoop Dogg's feature as a Just Eat ambassador? But they still do have the strongest brand health out of all the top 3 category leaders. So
yeah.
They're the one to knock off. But
It's such an interesting space, and it's so, as you say, competitive and tight. And what will happen now? Like, will there be a flood of investment from DoorDash into delivery? Like, it's just going to watch this space. I did an episode with Adam Foley from Bountiful Cow maybe last year, but he was talking about Deliveroo actually, and how they changed their media buying strategy. So a lot of the apps were advertising towards the end of your workday. So thinking about people going home and, on the commute home. And they actually realized through their data in their app, I don't know if it's still the same, but this is what they did this time. They realized that people actually start thinking about dinner after lunch. And so they started to advertise more around that time of day. It was cheaper. And they were able to get people when they were starting to think about their post-work meal. And, so they weren't relying on that. I'm sure they still advertise that other day part, but they were able to kind of find a space there that was cheaper, driving more efficiencies, and really interesting.
That's fascinating, because I typically think about next night's dinner immediately after the dinner I've just had. The final thing I will touch on Deliveroo is it's actually the market's immediate response to the acquisition. DoorDash's share price dropped 10%, which was the sharpest decline this year off the back of the acquisition. So we'll see how that turns itself around over the course of actually them integrating. But the immediate response from markets wasn't a positive one.
It's going to be amazing to watch, but it took us all by surprise. I'm sure there's a whole crew in Deliveroo that are absolutely delighted by it.
Yes.
We are experiencing a wonderful heat wave. We hope it's going to continue for the summer, which prompts us to think about sun care. Dan obviously is an Aussie. What's the campaign in Australia? Slip, slap, slop. Is that what, or something like that?
I mean, I'm fully acclimatized to the UK now. I can't tolerate 16-degree weather here. Which is rare anyway.
There's a really it's an incredible brand. I will butcher saying it, but La Roche-Posay, I think. Do I sound French? They're riding a wave in the US. It's really interesting. I love this. It's a category that to me seems like it should just be usage should be like 100%. Right? I'm just like, why? But that aside, this is a brand I've always felt kind of like a prestige brand. Price points are probably a little bit higher. They've different kind of bottles and all that kind of stuff. And then you've got kind of the the others in the category, and then you've got within the same category, you've got own label, like, like you can get sun cream in Lidl.
Yeah.
I think trust is probably a big one in this one, right?
Yeah. I mean, the category, that we're seeing, particularly in the US, is increasing really quite rapidly. So penetration over the last year or so has increased by 7 percentage points. So that's increased from 52% up to 59% from May of last year through to April of this year. And that growth is being driven across the majority demographics. But where La Roche-Posay, as you mentioned in particular, now they're starting to build some really strong momentum, and that's across their funnel. So I think, as we'll probably all have seen, they've been pretty busy with a lot of their marketing activity in the US as of late. And that includes their ongoing partnership with the US Open as their official sunscreen partner. But there are a couple of particular pieces of brand building work that they've launched over the past year or so, which have been absolutely brilliant. And this one was a really cool one. So it was the Club La Roche-Posay, which was a campaign that was developed by the creative agency Analog Folk, as well as Untold Fable. And essentially it was built around the launch of their new Anthelius UV Pro sports sunscreen. So what really, I think, stood out with this particular piece of work was the mission behind it. So they weren't just promoting a product. They were also tackling a wave of sun safety misinformation that's been flooding platforms such as TikTok. And essentially the team really tapped into a key insight, and that was that Gen Z and millennials are feeling pretty overwhelmed by it all. So rather than trying to scare people into using sunscreen, they've gone for something a little bit more uplifting. So essentially the whole campaign leans into sport, confidence, and smart skincare. And it's all designed to speak to active audiences who really want to, want some solid advice. And that's not just necessarily scare tactics.
Yeah.
But then there was another incredible piece of work that they launched with the agency BETC Paris. And this was called the Life-Saving Routine. And this was a really vital initiative, which was all around raising awareness of melanoma. And that was where they turned a social media beauty trend into a life-saving routine. So there was this recent study where scientists from the International Agency of Cancer predicted that the number of new cases of cutaneous melanoma per year are going to increase by more than 50% from 2020 to 2040. And so essentially they launched this educational campaign focused on early detection through the ABCDE method. And to do that, they partnered with Latin America's leading beauty creators to bring to life basically life-saving information into the skincare routines that their audience trusts most in a global social campaign. And this is where, when we start to really kind of dig into our data, we can see, for example, their preference metric among the 18 to 34 demographic within that May of last year through to April this year timeframes increased by 5 percentage points. That's right, up from 8% through to 13%.
And it's really interesting because, again, to go down that route of, I guess education can be, it's a risky one, right? Because you can just seem preachy as a brand, can't you? But they've obviously done it in a way that's, tapping into what people are doing, into the right audience to get the message out there in terms of the right influencers and that kind of, that piece, I think is really, really interesting. And there's a trend you have to go against. Kids are now aware of the UV in the sun on a given day, and they're aware of it because they're like, that would be good for tanning. That's what they're saying. You're talking 15, 16, 17-year-olds. They're not talking about, I will need extra sun cream or extra sun protection on me today. They're like, no, this will be a good tanning day. And you're like, oh my God, no, this is... So how do you get to that audience? Because to get into that habit, is so important. And they're obviously, that's what they're seem to me to be trying to do, right?
Yeah, completely. And I think that's just where, really tapping into behavioral trends and things like that are such critical pieces of any strategy behind this sort of work. And, fundamentally, if we think about the sunscreen, sun care category as a whole, it is built for protection. And that's what it is. Yeah. And I think whilst there are, lots of different ways that the product can be advertised, I still think, in my view at least, that it is so important that narrative is still entwined with that fundamental human truth, and that is that it is a protective product to protect you from, something that could be very dangerous if neglected. And so I think the fact that they have taken this truth and adapted it into a campaign designed to reach certain audiences through people that they trust. And again, trust being one of those key drivers, particularly in this category. I think is just such an excellent way of doing that. And I think but I think it goes beyond just necessarily the demographic piece. So obviously I mentioned that those preference metrics that we saw shift across that 18 to 34-year-old demographic. But actually, if we look at their full funnel performance, again, through that same time period, so from May of last year to April of this year, we've seen awareness has increased by 5 percentage points. That's up from 32 to 37. Considerations increased by 3 percentage points. That's up from 21 to 24%. Claimed usage is up 2 percentage points from 9 to 11%. And then preference across all demographics is up 2 percentage points from 5 to 7%. So I think what we're starting to see is they've got a brand who are taking human and life truths into the core of their approach, but they're executing in a way that doesn't necessarily scare people, but takes that educational route and really starts to connect and build affinity with the brand, really.
Yeah, I think that's the key. That's where they seem to be doing well. And again, I probably should know the pricing, but I've always felt that it was a premiumly priced brand, and I think it's good to see again brand power can deliver price premiums, right? In any category, but it's definitely interesting in this one. Bit of work to do with the male audience, though. Don't have a strong affinity with men. Is that a category thing, or is it just this brand?
Yeah, so we know that the category performs strongest among females. So females make up 55%, of the actual sun care category in the US. But yes, that's exactly right. I think, while it does lean more toward female, males still represent 45% of that potential consumer and potential target. So, which obviously is a sizable growth opportunity for the brand. So you could argue then with 45% of the category up for grabs, there's evidently a clear opportunity for them to really sort of close the gap there and start to win share.
And I think some of the other brands are kind of partner with, what might be seen as more kind of, different types of events that might be leaning towards the men. So there's probably a bit of a job to do. Although, I think the tennis is kind of a pretty good split 50-50. I was reading as well that 1 in 5 Americans will be at risk of developing skin cancer by the age of 70. So it's just, I'll do the scaring if they won't. It's just terrifying. Put sunscreen on, people.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It is quite wild to see how dramatic the drop is across genders for the whole category. So La Roche, I'll let Jasper finish the pronunciation. But dropping from 47% with the female demographic to 19% for males, and seeing similar significance across all brands that we're tracking just goes to show how much of an opportunity there is to acquire of men in the US. Yeah. And again, I'll go back to I don't understand. The sun is out. Just put sunscreen on. What's the worst that can happen? You don't get a tan. The dad in me coming out. So on to our next topic, and this was a masterpiece, and must have taken so long to get this across the line. But Lego at the Miami Grand Prix was just phenomenal. Lego doesn't need any, I would imagine, help in brand awareness. Is there a person in the world that doesn't know Lego? I think 9% maybe of US people. Who are they?
This was an activation that I say the inner child in me would be screaming. And to be honest, the adult me is also ecstatic by the work that they've done. So I was reading an article actually on ESPN that wrote about how the idea came about, and it was that last year the Lego Group's senior management was visiting their model production factory in Czechia, and they were tasked with dreaming up ideas to promote. Lego's recently signed partnership with F1, and this is obviously where the leadership team went into the sort of what if moment and what could we do. And then obviously the article itself included some commentary from some of their senior leadership, including Julia Goldwyn, who's the chief product and marketing officer there. And she spoke about, what they could do with F1 that would be completely epic and beyond anything that they've done before. And then cue this execution of 10 life-size, fully drivable Formula One cars that required nearly 400,000 bricks each, I think I wrote. And supposedly it took around 22,000 hours of work involving 26 Lego specialists. And I just think, I think this particular activation correlates perfectly with, again, from looking at the data that we're seeing within this particular piece, while the consumers who are aware of Lego might describe the brand as spontaneous, some of those key verbatim themes that do pull through that are unique to them include things like creative, building, innovative, versatile. Obviously, all of these themes, I think you could say, tie quite nicely with how they've shown up at the Miami Grand Prix.
Yeah.
It was so good. It was so good. And the drivers were talking about it at the end, like the 3 winners. Did you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this is where it feels like it was just like a textbook brand alignment of how do you make the most of 2 pretty unsuspecting brands coming together. Lego like feeding into that nostalgia, even what it seemed to be like for characters or celebrities that seem to be quite serious, hard to relate to. And when you've got Lewis Hamilton, who's what I imagine is a billionaire, like giggling with fun and enjoyment, and that really makes you feel like it, like that fun and childlike enjoyment that you get out of Lego. But even to your point, like at adulthood now, and like Lego spans the full age bracket of who can interact with it. It just felt like it was, really setting the bar for how you do brand collaborations extremely well, and especially with the F1, which seems to just be drawing more and more consumer brands towards it.
That's another whole different thing. I got to speak to Ellie Norman. She was at Man United at the time, and she's ex-Formula One at the time of Drive to Survive. And one of the things she said in that episode was the best decision they made was not making Drive to Survive. It was handing over editorial control and not trying to edit it as F1. So like giving that away and saying you know storytelling to that audience in this format better than we do, and we'll get in. So I thought, like, that's fascinating, and it's just been a phenomenal turnaround for what was a kind of a dusty old brand, really. I think you know, and they revolutionized it. I think it's phenomenal. And now, you bring Lego in, and then all of a sudden you've got this just kind of vibrant. Everything about it's vibrant, isn't it?
Yeah. And F1, F1 is just such a attractive asset for so many different types of brands. Like you've got Louis Vuitton, who was activating the Australian Grand Prix. Then you've got Lego at Miami. You've got Kit Kat thrown in there, but then you've got B2B tech giants like Atlassian. Like just the spectrum of this asset because of the global reach. But then also you've got the parents all the way through to children. For the back of Drive to Survive, I feel like I'm just fanboying F1.
I know,
I don't even really watch F1, but I think sponsorship asset is phenomenal.
Yeah, it is. I think just to very quickly build on it as well, and I love it because it's a theme that we now touched on, I think, on almost all of our other singles episodes. And I think what it also achieves fantastically is emotional brand building. And what I mean by that is, for the F1, passionate fan of say their later adult years, Lego might have been a core part of their childhood. It's in combining that nostalgic aspect of childhood through to modern day passions. Similarly, if you're a parent loving your F1, your children might be to Lego. I think it's just a really clever way of tying in these two loves that might connect two different parts of somebody's life so well, which is partly why I think it was also such a brilliant
phenomenal one. It's a phenomenal one. I think the only piece that kind of gets maybe pushed back on Lego is kind of sustainability, right? And so people looking at that and kind of going, the environmental impact of 400,000 bricks, I don't think they're obviously on a journey. These things don't happen overnight, but I still think it's a piece of the puzzle that they haven't fully addressed as a brand. It doesn't seem to be affecting them at all. I don't know the ins and outs of that journey they're on, and I've no doubt it is a journey, but I think it's something probably, needs to be addressed from them. I guess the argument is people probably still have Lego from when they were kids, and that gets handed down through generations.
Yeah.
So it does recycle through kind of generations in that way.
Yeah. No, it's such a fair call out. it would be something to follow up, interesting to follow up on, to see if they are addressing that, and if anyone in that category is addressing it, all the way from Hot Wheels, Barbie, or Mattel. Like, is there wide open space where sustainability hasn't been properly addressed at all?
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a whole other. We got very serious today, lads, didn't we? We should have run this at 5 o'clock. I'm there. Like,
we mix a sun care with a sustainable toy is the takeaway.
Now I just need delivery to tell me what I'm having for dinner.
Yeah, you need to do it now. Well, listen, thanks a million. Look, brilliant to have the insights, your perspectives on it, and of course the tracksuit data that's kind of bringing it all together. And I know you guys have been traveling a bit. I know the team, Dan, have been out and about on the road in France. I don't know if it was last week, the week before. I know you're heading to Ireland in a couple of weeks as well. So I know if people want to catch up and meet the Tracksuit team, just to get in touch, go to gotracksuit.com, or just find you guys on LinkedIn and connect. And yeah, I know you guys are keen to meet the agencies and the marketers out there and share the platform, because it is, I keep saying it, it's incredibly powerful. Brilliant. Great Thanks, stuff. Man. Well, listen, we will chat to you in a couple of weeks, and appreciate your time.
That's great. Thanks, Connor.
Cheers. I hope you enjoyed that episode of The Singles. It's always great to catch up with Dan and Jasper and get their insights, of course, powered by Tracksuit data. But the guys definitely dig deep, don't they, and find out more behind these stories. And they were fascinating stories. I mean, look, for me, the Lego Formula One was just phenomenal. I can imagine the coordination it took to get that one over the line. And it was the thing that the winners talked about at the end of the race. I stayed up, I was watching that race, and it was 9 o'clock. But they were talking about that part of the race and how much they enjoyed it. So, brilliant move by Lego. Great to see what's going to happen with Deliveroo and that DoorDash acquisition. And of course, don't forget, put the sunscreen on. If you want to find out more about Tracksuit, go to gotracksuit.com and find out how they can be your affordable, always on brand tracking dashboard. That's it from me for this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Of course, if you are enjoying episodes of That's What I Call Marketing, and you can do us one small favor, rate or review an episode, we would really appreciate it. So thanks so much for tuning in. Take care.